Okay, here we are on the 12th of Sivan. And what does the Yom Yom speak to us about today? So the Frierdiker Rebbe writes in one of his letters, excuse me, I'm sorry, today's the 13th. 13th, Yud Gimel Midas Horachamim, great days of mercy for all those who, which is everybody, needs God's mercy. All right, the Tzemach Tzedek composed many melodies. He studied Torah. This is the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. He studied Torah aloud and with song. Sometimes he would interrupt his studies or his writing, Chassidus, or responsa, whatever. These are halachic writings. And he would sing a melody in the middle of his study. So my grandfather, that's the Rebbe Maharash, one of the sons of the Tzemach Tzedek, related. So the Tzemach Tzedek's sons related, or the Tzemach Tzedek's son related, that from the sound of the Tzemach Tzedek's voice, his melody, he, the son, could tell what subject his father was studying. Soul to soul, breath to breath, song to song. All right, so let's articulate the song of the Tanya. Lessons in Tanya, Yud Gimel, begins on page 862. Yeah, just near the top of the page, the word is Vehine. And it's, of course, the same word, Vehine, in Likutei Amorim. And in Likutei Amorim, it begins kind of smack in the middle of page Ayin Tes. Okay, where are we? Shar HaYichud Ve'emunah. Yichud is unity. This is the gateway to, right? Opening the gate to being able to walk the walk toward, meaning to invest in, get oneself invested and on the way with the experience of God's yichud, his unity, and to cultivate emunah, which I call the evidence of things unseen. Right? We spoke about a couple of ways of cultivating the love of Hashem, and one is to see, at least with one's mind's eye, that everything is invested with a godly force, and particularly if you look at animate things which are flesh, and yet they're animated. So there's the flesh, and there's the animation. The animation we don't see, but we see the results of it. And those results give us a sense that there's something beyond what we see, which is emunah. And we're in the beginning of, or in the middle, less than the middle, of talking about developing perspectives so that one can see and have a sense of the unity of Hashem and the emunah, evidence of things unseen, which is emunah. So we've talked about a metaphor. The metaphor is the sun shining down on the earth. And we know that the light of the sun, when it emanates down on earth, gives life to the things on earth. That's how the plants grow. And that's the animals eat the plants, and all of the ingested energy of the sun becomes a nourishment for everything. And then we said, however, if the sun itself were to be down here below, it would burn up everything. All right, so that's a metaphor for Hashem, and it poses a problem. Yes, on the one hand, like the sun, everything that exists is being infused constantly with the light, the quote, we'll use a quote now, it's a metaphor, the energy, the light of God. And if it weren't, it couldn't exist. No problem. But at the same time, we have an opposite expression that ein od milvado, there is nothing besides him, meaning this blade of grass and this plant is a container for him himself. And that poses a problem because him himself is infinite, ein sof. And the blade of grass and the lump of dirt are finite. So how does infinite and finite get together? We said if the sun got together with the thing that enlivened, it would burn the thing away. How does God get together with the thing that he brings life to, and yet the thing remains something separate, or at least seemingly something separate? So that's the issue we're dealing with. And we say that the solution to that question is contained in two words: Havaya hu or Elokim. It's actually three words. Havaya, Hashem, is Elokim, right? But we even have a pasuk, Shemesh umogin Havaya Elokim, without the he. A sun and a sheath is Havaya Elokim. And we're in the middle of explaining Havaya. Havaya is the Yud Haveh, the continual, constant source of being, which is drawn into everything and effused from the one about whom we say there is nothing else. And at the same time, we have to then come on to then where does the Elokim part come from? Where does the limitation part come from? So let's start. Longer introduction than I was planning, but I think it helps to get oriented like that. Okay. Mihine, middle of page Ayin Tes. Mihine, kamei shemida zu yishivche chelakosh bohu labadoi. This mida. Now, what are we talking about? Hashem, as he mamshich, draws chayas and life force into the world from seemingly nothing, meaning something that's totally out of our ken, our ability to recognize it, to understand it, to grasp a hold of it. And this is a great midah, a great praise of Hashem, that he is Gadol, he is great, and he is Havaya, that which is going on all the time. Because nothing that is created can create something, right? By definition, if you're created, you're an object which is created, you can't create. You can modify something, but you can't bring yourself into existence. Neither can you bring something else from nothing to something in existence. And this midah, that is measure, we call it his midah, his attribute, that he's able to bring things from seeming nothing into something, that he's able to be the sun and at the same time be on earth. In other words, that he can have his infinite side, his Havaya and his Elokim matched, his limitlessness and his limitedness. This, and even the one side of it, that he can create something from nothing, this is something which is out of the realm of human understanding, to understand it clearly. No created being has the ability to understand, lahaskil or lahasig, to grasp with one's seichel, with one's intellect, and to get a hold of midazu, this attribute, v'yecheltoi, and this ability that Hashem has, livra yesh me'ayin, to create something from nothing, because it's not in the realm of anything that we do, or can do, or ever will do. No matter how much AI advances, it's an intelligence that's being built into technologies that comes from someone who's a human who's creating the brain. Now, there will be artificial intelligence that acts as a brain creating other brains, but the initial brain, just like the initial impetus for all of creation, comes from something which is apart from that, something which is not artificial. And that's just the crude analogy to God himself. Of course, he's not artificial, but he's unique. Shar HaYichud, right? The gate of unity and singularity. He is singular. He's the only thing about which you can say that his existence comes from himself. That's a paraphrase of something the Rambam says, that he's the one whose existence comes from himself, number one. Existence is primordial. It always was. Nothing brought God into existence. He is the only thing which has existed, forever isn't the right word, but has existence before time, after time, and within time. So nothing he sells. There's not within the ability back inside, livra yesh me'ayin, anything that exists as a result of that, and does not have the ability to bring something into existence from nothing into something, and enliven it. Because the creation of something from nothing, it's something that's beyond the realm of human understanding to grasp it, and certainly to implement it is impossible. Because this ability to create yesh me'ayin, something, well, the words are something from nothing, right? But I've said this many times, and it's always worth saying again. Nothing does not mean nothing. Nothing means no thing. There's no thingness, right? Here is a thing, right? Right here, a thing. This thing came from some machinery that put together certain metallic substances. The metallic substances came from somewhere. And all the way back to the subatomic particles which are in the metallic substances. And where did those come from? Ultimately, there was an allness, which we call nothing, because it's God himself, but so-called before he emanates separate things. So that stage of godliness, which is before emanation, or deeper than emanation of everything, we call the ayin, the nothing. And from there dribbles out, dribbles not a good word, there shines out, that's the metaphor, rays from there, which are the operating force that becomes substantiated in the substantial, tangible creation. But it's impossible for any created thing to do the first thing, because we are not an ayin. We are, by definition, a yesh. This ability that Hashem has, that ability to do this, which is impossible for any created thing to do, is from his attribute of Gedula, his greatness. This is the Gedulasa shel HaKodesh Baruch Hu. This is the greatness of Hashem. The greatness of Hashem is not embodied in the creation. I mean, it's amazing, the creation. It's infinite in itself, but it's only a speck of something much deeper than that, which is way beyond the creation. So this is the midah of the greatness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu midosav acheres, the achdus poshet, and at least at its source, at their source, the Hashem, the Holy One, blessed be He, and His attributes are one simple unity, before any differentiation. As it's brought in the Holy Zohar, the Ihu v'Garmei Echad, that He and His causations, the things that He brings about, are one. And that's before He begins to bria, to make the creation, which is actually the second world. The first world is the word of Atzilus, which still has a sense. It's something, but it has a sense of the so-called nothing, or the everything from which it comes. The bria loses that sense of oneness with Hashem, or at least doesn't have it in the same kind of wholeness. Just as it's impossible for a created being to understand its creator, neither can we understand the creator's attributes. So just as we can't understand his greatness, which is his greatness is the way he spreads himself out, gives himself away. Yesterday we connected it with the midah of chesed, giving, infinite giving, as opposed to gavura, which is just the opposite, infinite sucking back or infinite contraction, which is the big deal, really. It's much easier, and you tell me if you have a different perspective, it's easier when we talk about the Ein Sof to say he just goes on and on and on and on forever. That's what Ein Sof means. That's an infinite kindness, giving, 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 giving. It's easier to understand that than the infinite contraction, contraction, shrinking, 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 which is also infinite, but it's infinite in the sense of the opposite of chesed, the infinite constraints, the infinite limitations. But anyway, the Gedulasai, which is his chesed, that's the side of him which creates something from nothing, right? And enlivens it. Because the Siv is written, Oilam Chesed Yabon. It's a pasuk. The world is built with kindness. This is happening here. Yeah. Kach, similarly, Mamish. En B'Yechelte. Now we go to the other side. His unlimited Chesed. We really can't understand that because everything that we are aware of has some limitation, right? Everything is conscripted, bounded, by definition, length, width, and depth. So, but it's also then, so we can't understand that infinity where there's seamlessness and openness and complete unboundedness. But we have a appreciation for it and even a soulful interest and resonance with it. So, but similarly, on the other side, Ach Mamish, similarly, just as we can't really understand all that, neither can we understand the opposite of that, which is the midah of him holding himself and restraining himself, which, as I said earlier, in a sense is even a greater wonder, or something, an entity that you call HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, and what makes him holy and different is that he's Ein Sof, he's infinite. And we said earlier, that's an amazing thing. But if you just say that he's unlimited, then where does limitation come from? The limitation is even a greater chiddush, a greater news. I mean, you would expect that which we call Ein Sof to be unending. But you wouldn't expect that in order for him to be really unending, we can't eliminate the possibility of him being ended, because that would be limiting him. We spoke about that yesterday, just to make that clear. If we just take Ein Sof to mean infinitely going out with no end, then you've limited him because he can't end himself. He can't bind himself. He can't constrict himself. And if he can't constrict himself, there's no constricted reality, which is the entire of creation. It has some definition and restriction. So you have to include limitedness in his limitlessness as part of his limitlessness. And that's certainly difficult to understand. So Kakmam, just as we can't understand, excuse me, that it's in his ability to create something from nothing, Kodikasiv, as is written, Oilam Chesed Yabana, it's a great act of kindness that he creates something from nothing, that he creates us. It's a lowering of himself. Think about that. It's a lowering of himself that he creates something. So similarly, similarly, just as it's impossible to understand his limitlessness, it's impossible to understand his limitedness, which are his gavoras, the holding back, the constraining. Kodesh Baruch Hu, of the Holy One, blessed be He. And that's why we call him the Holy One. He's separate. Holy means separate. He's separate from anything that we can really understand with our created, and they are only created, minds and man's hearts. Shehi midas hatzimsum, which gevura. Now we're turning now and discussing the attribute of limiting himself. Limiting himself means he contracts himself. Umaniya hahispashtis, and he holds back some of the flow. Now we're going to see it isn't really holding back. We'll see now what language is more appropriate, but his experience is holding back. He's limiting himself. He's limiting himself of this hispashtis achayas, of the flow of the life force. Migdul asay, from his greatness. He's restraining that. Excuse me. He's restraining that. From being coming down and being revealed to the creations, to enliven them, and to keep them in existence in a way that the Ein Sof, the infinity, is revealed. He's constraining that, restraining that. What is he doing? He's concealing that. Okay, that's the important thing. When we say that he's constraining, limiting himself, he's holding back. He isn't holding back because he's everywhere. But he's hiding that allness. This is the appropriate expression. Hester panim. He's concealing his panemius. His panemius is Havaya, continual bring. But he has another attribute, which he needs to have. And if he didn't have it, again, I'll say it, you would be limiting him. his ability to conceal that allness and create the experience of separateness and difference, which is called worlds. Olam, world, miloshin, helam, concealing. So the operating word for this is hesterponim. He conceals his face, or he conceals his panemius, his innerness, which is mainly about giving, in order to give a gift of his kindness to a creation which experiences itself as something unto itself. So what's happening is the godly energetic, the force of enlivenment, which only he is the source of, is concealed in the body of any created being. And as a result, it appears that the body of the created thing is something separate from him. And it looks as though it's not like the ray of the sun. You know, when you see the ray, even if you're not looking directly into the sun, you look and there's the sun. Here, the ray of the sun conceals, this is the faculty of his Gevura, conceals the sun itself, which is him, the source of everything. So the ray is covering over from, in our metaphor, from the spreading out of the sun. So what appears to be is that this thing that you're holding, this pen, appears to be, it's truth that I'm saying, it's something different from the hand that is holding it, isn't it? That's a fact. That experience is a result of Hashem's Gevura, of Hashem's Hesterponim, where there's something being hidden, which is in Od Milvado, that really there's nothing besides it. That's being hidden. Even though the thing, that pen, is not really a thing on its own. It owes its whole existence, as everything does, to Hashem continually bringing it into existence. And it really is like the continual beaming of the sun's ray from the source of the sun. Nevertheless, these are what's called the gevuras, the constraining, restraining faculty, godly faculty of giving the experience of separateness. Ashehu kol yochel, which, and this is the expression of what we've been saying before, Hashem is called a kol yochel. He's able to do everything. He can bring about the revelation of godliness in everything, or he can conceal the revelation of godliness in everything. And it's the concealing which brings about the experience of separate things. Because he is kol yochel. He can bring about the experience of separate things while his allness is continually invested in those separate things, albeit in a hesterponim, in a concealed way. He's able to tzamsim chachayis. He's able to contract the life force, the haruchnius, and the spiritual as anishba meruach piv, which flows from the breath of his mouth. He's able to contract the life force and the spiritual energy which flows from the breath of his mouth, and hide it away. In order that the body and the singularity of existence of each separate thing doesn't disappear. He wants worlds. He wants plurality. Another way of saying it. This singularity wants plurality. He wants worlds. I mean, he's doing this for a reason. He's hiding himself because Nasa Kodesh Baruch Hu rose up in God's mind, livroi, to create. He wants this. The Alter Rebbe gives us some comfort here by saying it's not within the realm of any created intellect to grasp this, to grasp the mahus of the tzimtzum. What exactly is the tzimtzum? Because, from our perspective, it's a bit of a contradiction. How is it with that which is infinite, i.e. goes on forever, able to limit himself? From our perspective, those two things are opposite. But Hashem, as we've said earlier, as earlier as yesterday, the Kabbalists call him the one who carries opposites. Because nivra lahasig. This is not within the power of any human understanding to grasp the mahus ve'atzmas hahester, the actual essence of the concealment. In fact, it's easier to grasp the Ein Sof, right? That's okay. He's Ein Sof. Yeah, well, if he's Ein Sof, how does he limit himself? If he has no end, how does he create worlds which have ends, demarcations? How is it that a thing can be limited and at the same time it can be something which is being brought into being continually from nothing to something? So he says the human capacity doesn't allow this, doesn't contain this. Just as it's impossible for the intellect of every created thing to understand the creation from nothing to something. How does that work? From complete amorphism, meaning amorphism, without any shape, without any form, morph, comes things which morph, which have a shape. How does that happen? So, both of which, that something can come from nothing, and that the something contains the nothing. These two things are not graspable by seichel anushi, human understanding, but they're graspable with the faculty of emunah. The faculty of emunah is where we have something in us that gives evidence to the truth of what we're saying. So this doesn't appear to be hogwash, so to speak. It appears to be and is really true, because there's something deeper in us than seichel, which we call emunah, with which that truth resonates. All right, that is today's Tanya. Ayanka.
So, in order to understand it, the Alter Rebbe is explaining everything through different levels of contraction. But really, he says we can't understand it. So is it kind of like Hashem doesn't, that might not even really exist, the contraction? Kind of like it's a virtual reality world.
No, it is a real world. It's not a virtual reality world. I know what you're saying. From the perspective of Ein Od Milvado, meaning there is nothing besides him, then one could say, quote, then this stuff which appears besides him really isn't anything. But that would belie, and that's where you're coming from. But that would belie the significance of Torah and mitzvahs. If it's really nothing, then anything goes. What's the point? What's the point? You're telling me it's really not real, it's a virtual reality, and yet, for some reason, we're supposed to do this stuff? What's the point? I'll take some other virtual reality machine.
But so to us, it is real.
Not only to us it is real, but it's to him it's real also. This is his panemius desire, remember. Livroi, his panemius desire is direle yizbora b'tachtoinim. Think about that. He wants his very self, that self which is beyond understanding, beyond limitation, he invests it. These two things are existing at the same time. His limitlessness and his limitedness are existing at the same time. In order for there to be an us to act out his deepest plan and wish, which is that he should have a dwelling place down here below, he has to create this below and populate this below with real entities in real worlds, which on the other hand are merely an experience of the contraction of his allness. This is not all a dream.
But to some level it may be.
From some perspective it is.
Right.
Yes. From the perspective of the Ein Sof, the Sof, the limited, is just a contraction or a concealment of something which is infinite. And we don't experience the infinite, at least not directly. We do through Emunah, but our experiences of the other side. And yes, you could say from that perspective, this is a particular presentation, isn't it? It's just a particular presentation of God. And if you really looked at who's God himself, you wouldn't have this particular presentation. So therefore, this particular presentation is some kind of at worst, you'll use the word illusion, or it's only a perspective. It isn't really the real thing. But it is really the real thing, because this is his panemius taiva, his panemius ratzon, his panemius desire. So yeah, it's a paradox. You're right. On the one hand, it's a virtual reality because it doesn't express openly the Ein Sof, the infinite, which is the real reality, right? Or the source of this reality. But on the other hand, don't take virtual reality to mean therefore it doesn't really exist. It does. It exists so much that it's the panemius of his, as deep as will, is that this sense of separateness should exist. And then what? We take the separateness and illuminate the allness which is within it. That's called his transformation, his hapcha. We transform the experience of separateness into the awareness of what's underlying that sense of separateness, which is the allness. So it becomes the medium for us to reveal God. The separate world, world in itself, which is separate, is the medium which we are given to work with in order to reveal the allness which is underlying it.
Yes, and also that's why we daven for whatever we are davening for, or you say Tehillim for somebody who is not well, because the fact that the world is changeable.
Yeah, and changing every second.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It's too hard to comprehend, but it's interesting to
attempt to comprehend. That's what he just said.
I know.
It's not within the ability of any human being to really grasp this. But to have a gefühl, as we say in Yiddish, we can have a gefühl for it.
Well, I was thinking that the sun, we feel the effect of the rays, but the rays are nothing that really physically comes out of the sun.
Well, what do you mean? They do come physically out of the sun. The sun is the driver of the rays.
But are the rays really there? It's just the heat coming out off the sun.
The rays are really there. But that part of that metaphor is if the sun is in the analog, if it's a singularity, how do multiple rays come? There's a whole spectrum of rays, right? There's the visible rays of light. There's the ultraviolet rays of light, the invisible rays of light. And so rays are something we're used to talking about. Yes, there's a whole spectrum of, you put a prism in front of a white light, you'll get a rainbow. That's, by the way, another metaphor that's used in Chassidus for the Tzimtzum, which is, I find that to be very explanatory and simple, right? You've got this allness. You put the prism, that's called gevuras. And then you have to ask, where do these gevuras come from? But you put a prism in front of it, and then you get the separate rays. We all know that the separate rays are just, what's the right word? They're not, refraction isn't the right word, subdivisions of the all white light. So similarly also, all of reality that we see as separate entities are just subdivisions of the allness of God himself. But the rays are real, right? The downside of the prism, the rainbow, is real. At the same time, we understand that in its source, it's not red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. It's all white. And those two things exist simultaneously.
Similarly, but it's not that the sun is projecting itself. It's a reflection of.
Yes, the sun.
Reflection. It's a manifestation of the heat coming off the sun.
In the sun, it's called heat. In the universe, it's called light. It carries heat with it, right? Of course, things are warm, right? And the Gevura parts, the medium that allows that to happen, is the atmosphere, right? Where in a certain quality of atmosphere, the sun, which is quality that gives us the ability to live in that light is the sun's projection through the particular quality of atmosphere that's our surrounding planet Earth. In another planet, that quality doesn't exist, and therefore it's heat only. Well, not only heat, it's always light, but it's hot, 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 hot. Or in other places, it's cold, 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 right? But there's always, the source is the light is carrying heat with it, and the atmosphere affects that heat, that sunlight, in such a way, in two ways: the quality of the heat and the quality of the light. And that atmosphere is the metaphor for the Simpson. He contracts himself in many different ways in order that worlds have different experiences. But there are all those separate experiences, and they are separate on the one hand. Atzilus is nothing like this physical world down here, but at the same time, they're all just different experiences of the singular Ein Sof himself. And that's really true. They are experiences of the Ein Sof. They're not fake in the sense of
virtue. I see that. Right.
Okay.
It's kind of, I mean, everything coming off the sun is a byproduct of its existence.
Yeah. All right. So we get, this is a great conversation. That's why we're doing this so much, because it takes a little time, and sometimes you have it, and sometimes you lose it. But the bottom line is, Ein Od Milvado, there's nothing besides him. And at the same time, he creates the experience of there being a whole bunch of stuff.
Right. He creates the experience, yes.
Right. And from that, you could come to think that there is stuff besides him. But that would be a mistake. There is nothing else besides him, but he is able to present himself in ways, think about the atmosphere, through this machinery called Tzimtzum, he's able to conceal that allness and allow the multiplicity to reveal itself.
I guess my real question was, on some level, does that Tzimtzum not even really exist?
No, it really exists. But if you're talking, there's before the Tzimtzum and after the Tzimtzum, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. There is. There's Hashem before the Tzimtzum. And remember, before is a tricky word, because time itself is a creation. Right. We've talked about this before.
Right.
So I always translate before as deeper than, right? Deeper than the levels of Hashem which create the experience of multiplicity are the levels of Hashem in which there's only the experience of him himself. But it's always there.
Okay. I don't want to take up more time.
Well, take it from the pasuk. Shemesh umagin Hashem Elokim. That's the way things go. The sun and the sheath are both godliness. The sun that's unlimited, and the sheath which creates the sense of which conceals that light, so there's a sense of separation. They're both God. One is Havaya and one is Elokim, but they're both God. Two-faced. And then, I don't want to mean that negatively, but he has two faces. He has the Ayin face and he has the Yesh face.
I guess my question is one Hashem and one is how we experience Hashem.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll talk about more of this as we go on.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for all the insistence on the question, because it's important. It's really important. It has to do with our whole way of experiencing Torah and mitzvahs, whether it's something that we say, oh, here's a book of what a person's supposed to do, or here's a teaching which teaches us how to adhere and to expose godliness.
Okay, I'll second the thanks. Thanks for the question. I just wanted to say thank you for the question.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
And the discussion, yeah.
Beautiful. Okay, we'll see you in Mir Tashem tomorrow.